I'm a member of the board of the International Transpersonal Association, and I'm pleased to offer this event at the conference through the ITA. And the ITA is an organization that's trying to bring a global organizing perspective to the transpersonal community, and also is very active in helping areas where there are not currently transpersonal organizations develop opportunities for networking and coordination. So in this particular panel, we've invited international speakers, Kaifang Zhu from China, Kiran Kumar from India, Elias Capriles from Venezuela, and Jana Morovic from South Africa. So have a little bit of diversity added to the conference due to the international approach. The topic of this panel is mystical spirituality, and we're going to allow 15 minutes for each of our speakers to present, and then the remainder of the session will be an opportunity for Q&A from the audience, questions and answers, and also possibly some interaction among the panel members. I invite you to pay attention to our first speaker, Elias Capriles. He's a professor from the University of Andes in Venezuela. He's a renowned scholar in the area of religion. I had the privilege of writing forward to one of his groups of books, and what my forward said was the part that I understood I thought was brilliant, and the parts that I didn't understand, I was just left breathless and with the sense that it was profound, even if it was beyond my capacity to grasp. So with that, I will turn it over to Elias.
Good morning. Okay, I'm improvising today because the subjects of my main talk and this one are, for coincidence of beyond my decision, similar. Okay, I'm talking about, for example, Dzogchen and Tantra and many Eastern systems share a vision of human evolution as degeneration. And this degeneration is impelled by the development of what is called avidya in Sanskrit and manikpa in Tibetan, which means it's a combination of ignorance of our true condition with a delusion that distorts the true condition of reality. I have made an adaptation of that theory, according to which we have 3 stages. Sometimes it's explained in terms of 4 yugas, sometimes in terms of 3. In terms of the 3 yugas, the first one would be the Satya Yuga, and it would be characterized by communion. By communion, I understand living together the true condition of all beings and the whole of the ecosystem. The second stage would be communicative, and by that I don't understand that in Habermas sense, but in a sense more similar to Marcuse and other people of the Frankfurt School. And by that I mean that we treat as subject the other as subject, and the other need not be necessarily a human being. The other may be an animal, maybe a tree, maybe a waterfall, the river, whatever. And the third stage is the instrumental, in the same sense, and more similar to Marcuse and other members of the Frankfurt School than, for example, to Habermas. And by that I mean that the other, whether a human being or nature, is used as a means to one's selfish purposes. Then the type of spirituality proper to the stage of communion is what I call meta-shamanic, but we could call it, well, many people call it the perennial philosophy. There are some people who really dislike that term. I am not a defender of that term or anything like that, because I believe that there are very important differences between many of the systems that were grouped as perennial philosophy. At any rate, the second stage, the communicative stage, is animistic shamanic, in a sense that, for example, in South America, the so-called shamans would not accept that label, but anyhow is often given them. And that is a communicative stage in which, that kind of spirituality fosters a relationship on equal terms between the human subject and whatever else he relates with, yeah? And this is very ecologically sound, because, for example, there is this French researcher, ethnologist, anthropologist called Philippe Decola, and he made a research in the Amazon. He was originally in Ecuador, and he realized that the tribe he was studying, in the place that they inhabited, the biodiversity was much greater than in the places that were not inhabited by them. They were the Achuara. The tribe is the Achuara. Then he was puzzled by that, and he brought a big team from the CNRS, the Centre National de Recherche Scientifique, and they did analysis with all scientific means available in the whole of the Amazon, and they found that everywhere the places, the regions that had been inhabited for the longer time were the ones that had the greatest biodiversity. Conversely, there is a book by Tom Dale and Vernon Gill Carter called Topsoil and Civilization, and they showed that nearly all big civilizations destroyed themselves by the bad use they made of the environment. So, this is very interesting, because we think that we are developing into something ever better, that is the view of modernity, and this suggests quite the opposite, because not only that, but nowadays we are in danger of destroying the whole basis of life on the planet. So we are doing worse than all the big civilizations that destroy themselves. Now, however, this so-called shamanic system, for example, in South America, which are the ones I know the better, I think real shamanism is Paleo-Siberian, and that is quite different. But in South America, the vision is that the reality that the shaman gains access to by means of, for example, psychedelic drugs is the true reality. And this everyday life reality is an illusory reality. And the would-be shaman, to use this word which is incorrect, has to get all these deities to dwell in his chest. And because he believes that they are real, he makes himself susceptible to their influence and their whims. Therefore, this is not really a liberating approach. It's ecologically sound, but the really spiritually and ecologically and in all senses sound stage was the first, and its kind of spirituality is the one that I think is the key to our survival and our transition to the next stage of human evolution, so to say. Then, for example, the shaman gets these beings, he sees these beings coming to him, and he tries to manipulate them either to harm or to heal. But in any case, he is not becoming free by doing that. He is just producing a new kind of bondage. And this is exactly our problem is bondage, and what we need is real freedom. So, what I call meta-shamanism, and I will give an example with the practice of Chöd in Tibetan Buddhism. In that practice, the practitioner goes to a charnel ground, and those places are very frightful because whoever spent the night there, who was a normal person, normally would die. And this was true. I mean, I could explain the reasons why this would happen, but we don't have time for that. So, it actually happened. So this yogi goes to that place, and he offers his own body as food to the demons who inhabit that place. And by a combination of different means, he gets to see those beings coming to eat him. And he might even feel their bites on his body. And of course, his intention is compassionate, because the intention is to liberate the harmful beings and to pay karmic debts with the beings one has karmic debts with, and so on. But the point is to realize the true condition of reality and get all those beings to instantly dissolve. So the individual, the yogi, is directed to, at some point, at the point of utmost terror, look at the mind in a certain way that will foster the self-liberation of delusion. And at that moment, all the beings will disappear, dissolve instantly, and he would experience the true condition of reality in this state of communion. And by repeating this practice, the propensities to be under the power of demons, in the sense of, according to this system, demons are actually our own thoughts. This is a very important point. And it's our thoughts that manifest as visions and are related to some place, and that is what the demon is. So, by repeating that practice, the propensity for delusion is gradually neutralized, and then, after some point, the individual can go into a dark room and induce some visions that don't allow the duality of subject and object to persist. So, duality is exhausted in a record time, and delusion is exhausted in a record time. This is quite different from what the shaman does, and yet it's very similar. It's very similar in that both see a lot of beings of another dimension that might be harmful or not harmful, but one of them sees them in order to manipulate them and achieve some mundane goals, whereas the other one, he invokes them in order to go up totally beyond the mundane and to become established in the supramundane. And I believe this is what we need at this time, because ecological crisis is the result of the gradual development of delusion that has made us feel to be in opposition with nature and other human beings and try to dominate them and control them. And by doing that, we are destroying nature, and we are on the brink of atomic war. And precisely what could heal that would not be the shamanic approach. It would be the meta-shamanic approach of communion, where all beings would realize the true condition of reality, which is one for all of them, for all of us. And that way we could come to real harmony and perhaps come to a real enlightened society. Of course that the effects of the destruction of the ecosystem cannot be avoided. We are going to go through a lot of disasters, but the only way, in my view, that humankind will survive, and not only survive, but achieve a way of life that hasn't been manifest in the world since maybe the Paleolithic, is by means of this kind of approach. So I think this is more or less, I still have 1 minute and 20 seconds, but I prefer to go now to the questions, and so we can open that part of the talk.
And actually, we're going to hold the questions till the end after everybody speaks, if that's okay with you, Professor Gavrilis?
No, then it's okay. Then we can do it at the end.
Okay. If we could do that to make sure that everybody gets their opportunity to speak. So thank you so much, Professor Gavrilis, and we'll let you answer the questions at the end.
Thank you, Harvey.
I'd like to now invite Kai-Feng Zhu from China. Dr. Zhu is...
know that they're very happy to help me, and that it's their pleasure, really. So that is the first question, because what you said doesn't match my personal experience. The other question is, when you compare to Dzogchen Buddhism, the ayahuasca shamanism and meditation in the Buddhist tradition is two things that have really enriched my life and continue to do so. To what extent do you think that they can coexist on my personal journey, or are they in any way at odds, do you think?
Well, firstly, I think that, of course, we were saying that this so-called shamanic approach was communicative. That means that you are not using the spirits against their will or anything like that. But since you take that to be the true reality, so long as you do so, you are making yourself susceptible to their influence somehow, rather than achieving freedom. And as to whether the two approaches can coexist, well, in ancient Burn, there was a Dzogchen also, there was shamanism. And the two things coexisted, but for them to coexist harmoniously and be a liberating path, then one has to be subject to the other. That means the liberating aspect, the aspect, for example, that I illustrated with the practice of church, has to prevail somehow, and the other thing can be used, for example, for healing, can be used, of course, not for destroying, but for healing and for positive things. There is no contradiction, but knowing that that reality is also illusory, and that would be my reply to your question.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I continue with his question towards Mr. Gavrilis. I also have experience with Amazon and Dzogchen. And I would like to ask if you have consulted the Tibetan lamas itself, if they see ayahuasca as a helpful instrument on the journey, and till what point do you think that Dzogchen practices like Todgal, for example, could be used to learn how to deal with the visions on ayahuasca ceremonies and to get behind them into natural state of mind?
Okay. Can you repeat the beginning of the first question?
Excuse me?
Can you repeat the beginning of the first question? Oh no, okay, I remember. It's okay.
Yeah, like till what point the Tibetan lamas themselves?
Well, not in particular about ayahuasca, But for example,
or about all psychedelics.
yeah, even the same Lama has given different answers to that question, because an enlightened teacher does not have a viewpoint of its own, and he replies to questions according to the needs of the questioner. So once we saw on the cover of a journal called The Mirror, belonging to the Dzogchen community, Joyal Namkenorbu said, yes, they can be used, but they require capacity. And as to the second question, Togel has some way to induce this vision, so there is no need to add another way to it. Yeah, it's like believing that something is incomplete, which is actually more complete than its completeness itself. But on the other hand, these visions of Togel have a dimensionality. For example, Chogyal Namkenorbu gave an example in which he had a vision of 5 tiglets, which are spheres of light, in a cross, like a cross. And when he tried to draw them, it was impossible for him to do so, because there would have to be a space between them, and there was no space between them, and yet they didn't overlap. So this dimensionality is absolutely wondrous, and it prevents you from feeling separate, from keeping to feel separate from divisions, and that's why they have something called the Roswell dynamics of the Dharmata, which neutralizes delusion very quickly, because they don't allow you to remain in duality.
Can I? Yeah.
Well, if Namkhai Norbu wasn't against the use of ayahuasca, I sometimes feel like maybe ayahuasca is somehow faster way and more accessible for Westerners, because we sometimes don't have time for 50 days darkness retreat and stuff like that. And if he's not against, I wonder if it would be a method to use Dzogchen actually to learn how to work with ayahuasca and to get into natural state by oneself maybe, or with the help of the masters, like not being like really under Namkhai Norbu's Dzogchen eyes all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think the answer is what he said. It requires capacity. I had many friends who were in the hippie times, and among my friends, 3 of them committed suicide. Also, for example, others fell on a power guru who used them and others became addicted to hard drugs. So, and at the beginning they were just users of psychedelics. So I think, of course, it could be used, but it requires capacity.
Okay, how about some questions for some of the other speakers?
Can I just say something to that? So in yoga practices, I'm also a yoga practitioner, we say when you are going into mystical world, you must have a guru. Guru is the word is actually translated dispeller of darkness. So what happens often to people when they're in those spaces is you do need somebody who has had more experiences to help you to, that's why I'm talking about spiritual emergency and spiritual emergence. People being able to help you on that road, I think are very relevant, and are they gurus or mentors, but I very much agree with you, there's been a lot of abuse by some of the gurus. One needs to be very careful and do all the Google searches and whatever not to make sure that you are finding a person with good credentials.
Yesterday, I want to continue with that. Yesterday there was a panel discussion on global mental health developments, and this issue was discussed for more than half an hour. So taking drugs, as Elias said, the capacity is one thing. As Hannah said, spiritual emergence is one thing. Emergence can lead to emergency. To stop that, you need a guide. Way back in 1976, Adrian Parker has written a book called ESP and Altered States of Consciousness. In that, he devotes a chapter on set and settings. How a set and setting can make a person a mystic or a schizophrenic. So, the tradition, the framework, the guru, the teacher, the guide provides the set and setting for the journey. If you live in a different set and setting, and if you don't have a guide, that journey can be disastrous.
Yes, exactly.
Perhaps one more question while the panel is officially convened, and then maybe afterwards for people who want to have a time with the different speakers. Is there one last question? Okay, it looks like everybody is satisfied, and thank you for attending.